Yep, and they getting kicked out.
What up, y'all? I'm watching some YouTube videos.
Well, you don't put it on the whole committee, but now I got my eye on you. Yeah.
What we also know is that there is not a single evidence that the president or his goonies have put forth that there are any single resource from taxpayers in Minnesota that has gone to aid and abet terrorism.
So federal dollars is not.
Oh, shit. See what's on here. Fuck it, let's watch this Jack Neal interview with the most canceled man in America, Nick Fuentes. See what happens.
Still freezing your man nipples? You need the new 340 GS.
Hopefully, we don't get kicked off.
Is the most canceled man. Rock bottom looks like that. Broke, no income, no platform, probably 80% of the inner circle. The search for truth. That is really the anatomy of how somebody is canceled. They'll pay somebody a full-time salary and they start to poke and look for ways that they can hurt you, to persuade you to stop saying the things that you're saying.
After years of forming his opinions and sharpening his debate skills, he asked one question that changed everything.
Now you're able to talk a little bit more openly about, let's say, black crime. You're able to talk more about illegal immigration. You're able to talk about Indians in a derogatory way. But the one group you're still not allowed to criticize is women.
The voice that has divided the nation, exposed the players range, questioned the say he is, with a mirror that America has learned to face.
Everything that I did was for America. It was for Christianity. It wasn't for hatred of other groups, to longing for justice.
Nicholas J. Fuentes. Welcome to the Jack Neal Podcast.
I think it's interesting he has a can of Monster in front of him.
Happy to be here, man. Guys, we are in an undisclosed warehouse right now. A little sketchy in here, but thought it looked cool. So,
What up, LA?
like, you're banned on most social media platforms. You're on a no-fly list. Your bank accounts are frozen. You're investigated by the FBI, and you even had someone try to come to your house to kill you. What exactly did you say that made you so dangerous?
Well, from the very beginning, the first thing that I said is that Israel is not our closest ally with the United States. And what is interesting is that so much has happened since that happened, which was about 8 years ago. And I guess it's important to understand how these things take place, which is that, for example, somebody showed up to my house with a gun trying to kill me because I said that after the election, I said, your body, my choice, which is like a twist on my body, my choice. I got doxxed. But my address had been on the internet because the SPLC posted it. Southern Poverty Law Center. This is one of these liberal outfits. They posted a photo of my house on their website. And this is, by the way, one of the richest nonprofits on the left. They're up there with the ADL. They're very wealthy, very powerful. And it's important to understand.
Anti-Defamation
Put
League.
the address out there, and crazy liberals, leftists got that, and they attacked my house because of something I said on Twitter. It's important to know that I was targeted first by the SPLC, by the ADL. This is why my address is out there. This is why I was branded at one time a white man. And a lot of people don't understand that that is really the anatomy of how somebody is canceled. Is you say something that is against, let's say, the hegemonic left. You say something that is against the most powerful global special interests. And people don't realize it works this way. So, like, for example, you'll say, Israel's not our closest ally. And then a group like the ADL, which is a group. They're called Anti-Defamation League. They're against the defamation of Jewish people. A group like that will identify you as an enemy of their special interest, which is the Israel lobby. They will pay somebody, not a significant amount of money, but they'll pay somebody a full-time salary to then follow you around. How you make your money, what you do for a living, your family, your employers, employees, friends, associates, and they start to poke and look for ways that they can hurt you, to persuade you to stop saying the things that you're saying. So in my case, from a very early age, I was not really controversial when I got started. I didn't really say anything that was that out there, but I was saying that Israel's not our ally. So they put somebody on me. In this case, it was Jared Holt at Right Wing Watch. Right Wing Watch is a subsidiary of People for the American Way, which is a Soros-funded nonprofit. So this guy would watch my show every night. He was paid to do this. It's his job. And he was paid to look for every time I said anything controversial, anything that sounded controversial, any joke that sounded offensive. And his job was then to clip what sounded bad, post it on Twitter, and say that represented that I'm a white nationalist, I'm an extremist, Christian fanatic. And this has taken place over the course of 10 years. Ever since I was 18 years old, this is what I have been subjected to. And after 10 years, you get a profile as all your worst clips, all the things that could sound bad, all those things have been compiled over your entire career, and then they make you out to be a fanatic, a nut job, a hateful person. And so that's how I got the reputation as a white, all the above. What they then do, of course, is they rile up their base. So the person that showed up at my house
What up, y'all? What up,
was
y'all?
a 23-year-old kid. I don't actually know what his motivation was. The police never told me. I imagine he was maybe feeling bad about the election. He showed up at my house about a month after that. Maybe he was upset about my tweet about abortion or feminism. But he was effectively sicked on me by these types of groups that built up that catalog of horrible things that engage in that reputational destruction. And so that's just a little insight into how this, sort of the anatomy of a smear, the anatomy of that kind of labeling and that kind of smear campaign.
Who do you think invented cancel culture?
Cancel culture's been around forever. I think it's maybe a better way to say it is it's character assassination. And we live in an open
Or
society.
ostracization?
Although that's not really the case this year. Charlie,
Ostracizing?
they tried to kill
Ostracization.
Generally speaking,
That isn't a
they're
word.
very violent political warfare.
Ostracizing.
So what they do now
Fuck. You
is
guys know what I
they
mean.
engage in reputational destruction, character assassination. If they don't like what you're saying, they go out there and they, like I said, they look for your worst moment, a bad joke, salacious personal scandal, and then they air that out to hurt your reputation and get you to apologize or stop saying what you're saying. And so I think that cancel culture has been around for a long time, but now the people that are using it the most, it is the billionaire political class. It is the oligarchs, effectively. Because you look at the most powerful people that are running our country, they have blood on their hands. They have blood on their hands. These are some of the worst people in the world. We're just now seeing some of the Jeffrey Epstein files come out. This is a notorious who rolls with underage girls, engages in blackmail. Of course, he dies under mysterious circumstances. He's friends with the most powerful people in the world. They're engaged in war crimes. They're engaged in corruption, bribery, lobbying. But billionaires are never canceled. It's always small-time political activists. It's always rogue congressmen like Thomas Massie or Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's an asymmetry, which is to say that it's always media money and power that are using reputational destruction against the weaker people typically that have very little influence or very little power, and they do that to silence dissent. So cancel culture is something that is used mainly by the powerful. It's asymmetric warfare.
You noted on your stream last night, it led me to this logical conclusion that they kind of manufactured it in a way, like, oh, this is racist, this is homophobic, this is transphobic, but really the only effect you get is when you say something anti-Semitic, you know? So, like, are you conspiratorial to the point where you believe that the whole thing was manufactured just so no one could say anything that was considered anti-Semitic by their standards?
I think it speaks to who wields the power in the country, because
Okay,
there's
right.
that famous adage, which is to learn who rules over you, learn who you're not allowed to criticize. That's attributed to Voltaire. Voltaire didn't say that, but nevertheless, it's very
What
true.
up, chat?
And it goes without saying, if you're at your job, you can't criticize your boss. You can't ridicule or attack your boss. Why? Your boss has power over you. If you offend him, he'll fire you. Similarly, in the United States, for roughly the last 10 or 15 years, it was very acceptable to attack straight white men, Christians. They were the butt of every joke. You could make fun of Southerners, you could make fun of hillbillies with Southern accents, you could make fun of white people for not having a culture, not being able to dance, attribute all the evils of the world to white people, or Christians for that matter. You were not allowed to criticize racial and religious and ethnic minorities. You couldn't criticize blacks, Hispanics, Asians, couldn't talk about mass migration. What has changed in the past year, though, is that it seems that some of the political correctness concerning the minorities has gone away. And in the past year, it seems now you're able to talk a little bit more openly about, let's say, black crime. People talk about black fatigue. You're able to talk more about illegal immigration, which is largely an Hispanic issue. You're able to talk about Indians in a derogatory way. But what is interesting is that a year after the Trump revolution in 24, Trump gets back in, political correctness seems to be dead. You look across the board, you can still criticize white people, and the left frequently does. Now you're able to criticize non-white people and the racial ethnic minorities. But the one group you're still not allowed to criticize is Jews. If you're called racist, that gets laughed off now. If you're called anti-white, well, you know, the left is pretty openly anti-white. But to this day, you still cannot be, you know, so-called or in reality anti-Semitic. And if you're following the logic, can't criticize the powerful, those that rule over you, that would seem to suggest that if you can't criticize, maybe they're the most powerful ethnic group in the United States of America. I think that's logical.
Nick, I do want to touch on that in a bit. First, I want to talk briefly about your backstory. I feel as though your interviews with Patrick Bet-David and Tucker kind of covered that fairly well, but some similarity that you and I have is you're a fellow speech and debate kid, right? You won 4 competitions in extemporaneous speaking in 2015, which is basically like giving a political speech on the fly. Do you think like being a debate kid kind of made you the speaker you are? Or do you think you've kind of always had this interest?
I always had this interest. I always loved politics. Ever since I was 12 or 11 years old, it was always my thing. I started to get into it, really because I was just curious about people. You sort of start to develop your consciousness around that age. You could say when you're like 10, 11, 12 years old, start to become aware. And I just started to think about worldly things. I wanted to know about history. I wanted to know about politics. The 2012 election was coming up, and I was a very young boy, but I wanted to know what was happening. So I went all in, and I read as much as I could. I really got into the libertarian stuff. I got into Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, and then in high school I really did get into, like you said, extemporaneous speaking, speech team, Model UN.
Did you do that your senior year?
I did it the whole time I was in high school, yeah.
Got it. I was curious, did you ever, because it's a fairly leftist activity, did you ever lose any competitions or like get in beef with anyone over saying something controversial in that activity?
Oh yeah, all the
Really?
time, all the time. I'll never forget, I was at sectionals or regionals. I think I won sectionals and maybe got to regionals my junior year. And they gave us, one of the topics I got for extemporaneous speaking was about Obama. And in the speech, I said Obama wasn't born in America. And I think every judge ranked me in last place just because I said that.
That makes sense.
It was very left wing, yeah.
I had a fairly similar experience with the activity. I did quite well actually. Like I was a national champion in it, so like that's why I was so nerdy and like doing stuff. And I was like, Like, how was Nick in this activity? Because he's a great speaker, but I can't imagine him doing that well with libertarian or conservative beliefs. Did you ever get kicked off the team, or were they pretty cool with you overall?
They were cool. The coaches knew that I was extremely conservative and they were very liberal, but they were pretty tolerant. Ironically, it was a bit more tolerant before Trump ran for office.
Right. Yeah.
For some reason, I think that things had been polarized at that point, but Trump just took it to another level. So, as a libertarian conservative, they were fairly tolerant, and that was maybe a less radical viewpoint also. That was sort of before nationalism came to the center. But no, they were fairly tolerant.
I think you kind of hinted who has the power to silence someone like you. But can you kind of give me an organizational chart of influence as you see it?
Bad things that we do follow us through life. Bad men raised up, good men crossing the knees. We're like children on this earth.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys. No, I'm talking to a couple people watching.
This isn't just a destination. It's a life because you know there's value in what it's.
Running late? With Braun, you can still look legendary.
Sure. So, I frequently talk about how the United States has a oligarchy. And maybe it's important to understand how power works in America. When people think about power, they think about government. They think about the president, they think about Congress, they think about elections and elected officials. But I think anybody that spends any amount of time thinking about this situation understands that there's a tremendous power of money in politics, because an elected official like the president has to raise $1 billion every 4 years. And who has the money to spend every 4 years $50 million, $100 million, without actually a tangible or direct return on investment? Maybe it's something qualitative, maybe it's something hard to calculate. It's not like, for example, buying a factory. Investing $100 million to buy influence is less tangible. Well, the answer is simple. It's billionaires. Billionaires have hundreds of millions of dollars to spend every 4 years. And you can go on Open Secrets and you can look at the top 10 individual contributors per cycle, and it's fairly consistent. It's people like Miriam Adelson. This cycle, it was Elon Musk, Tim Allen, Reid Hoffman, a number of others. And so you have to understand about politics that it's a money system. Politics is controlled by money. And what does the money buy? Well, it buys favorable regulatory oversight. It buys favorable treatment in a particular jurisdiction, in a particular state, or from the federal government. And so to create an organizational flowchart, I would say something like this. You've got Congress and the presidency. They actually have to answer to their billionaire donors. Where do billionaires come from? Billionaires come from industries like Silicon Valley, Wall Street. Where do those people come from? Somebody at Silicon Valley comes from Stanford University. Where are all the big Silicon Valley founders and entrepreneurs from? They all come from Stanford University, which is the premier college that's in that area. And so you understand that it's a intelligentsia, academic, money, and political system. And once you understand that we have a system that isn't primarily about elections, then you maybe begin to understand how influence is actually exercised in the country. And I would say that, for the most part, people's understanding of politics is basically correct. I think what they get wrong is they don't see how particular groups or special interests will try to control the bottlenecks or particular choke points in the system. So, for example, a lot of people talk about AIPAC, American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and they like to say, well, when you look at the biggest contributors, the biggest lobbies in politics, AIPAC doesn't tend to show up. Why is that? It's how AIPAC operates. AIPAC doesn't actually do a lot of direct giving to a particular politician. But what they do is they manage a number of different billionaires or high-level millionaires and their political giving. So they'll find the candidate they like, and if that person pledges allegiance to Israel, they'll pick up the phone and they'll call their group of donors, and all those donors will give as individuals. This way it doesn't show up on the paperwork. This is one of the ways it's concealed and obfuscated. Moreover, in the last cycle in 2024, those donors marshaled $100 million to spend. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a ton of money, actually, because billions of dollars are spent across all the different elections. Presidential election, congressional elections. But what did AIPAC do specifically? They singled out every congressman that voted against foreign aid to last April. Some progressives and one Republican, Thomas Massie. They funneled $100 million, a lot of that money, into those particular races. They funded primary candidates that would take the nomination from the incumbents. And so, for example, in Massachusetts and other states, you had progressive Democrats that took the nomination from an incumbent Democrat congressman. And what they do by focusing on, let's say, a handful of races, singling out, isolating the 3 or 4 congressmen and women that voted against, they make those people lose the election. What they do is create a chilling effect. They don't have to spend millions of dollars in every race. If they spend it in 3, everybody, it's just not worth the trouble. And this is how you can have AIPAC rally resources in just a few districts, but send a message to all of Congress, which is, if you go against us, if you go against Israel, you will lose your seat. So there's this process of refinement. It's not to say that everybody in Congress is necessarily being bribed to the tune of millions of dollars, but everybody knows the score, which is that in order to be in Congress, you have to pass that check. If you don't, you might be dealing with $20 million from AIPAC funding a primary challenger in your district. And that's just sort of one example of how they'll take a bottleneck or a choke point, and a very determined, motivated, organized, powerful group can have an outsized and disproportionate amount of influence.
This feels like a very Gen Z blunt question to ask, but like, why do they even want to be in Congress? Like, why does Trump even want to be president if he can't like really enact real change? Like, is it just a money motivation?